Hi, my name is Michael Robinson. I'm the Associate Creative Director of Houston Cinema Art Society. Thank you so much for staying tuned for our Q&A with the filmmakers of our really amazing Borders No Borders documentary shorts section. I want to give a special shout out to one of our supporters, Independent Media Arts, for their constant support of the prize money for this year. It is my pleasure to introduce some of the amazing filmmakers represented in this section today. Let me go ahead and bring them on, and they will go ahead and introduce themselves. Hey, everyone.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us. My name is Manuel.
And I'm Marta Rodriguez Maleck.
And we're the directors of NONSTOP, and we're based in New Orleans, Louisiana.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Alejandra Vasquez, and I am calling from the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm the director of the film FRONTERA.
Perfect. Really appreciate you both being here. And also really want to congratulate you all on your work. I really love both films. I had the pleasure of helping program them, and truly, I mean, I was just so astounded by every single film in this selection, both of yours included. Rewatching them for this Q&A just like gave me so much joy, and I'm so excited to be able to screen them. I want to get started. Oh, absolutely. I'm sorry for the little bit of lag there. I just want to get started and just kind of ask about the origins of y'all's work. Kind of talk about how y'all decided, these are the projects, and then also kind of how they shifted from maybe when you originally were trying to film them to kind of figure out where the project led to the final film that our audience just saw.
Should we start?
Yeah.
Okay.
You want me to take that one?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so early on in the shutdown in New Orleans, we kept seeing these articles that said that the Black community in New Orleans was being disproportionately affected by COVID-19. And I think, Zach was very much interested in creating work that explored the why. There were a lot of kind of speculations, and he suggested, if we think about a place where a lot of different people are crossing paths, whether that's healthcare workers or, the bus drivers who are like the frontline workers, people going to get groceries, people going to the doctor, they're really all on public transportation. So at first we were really interested in the ways that all these different journeys were intersecting. As we started filming on the bus, though, we realized that a really major thread was really workers' struggles and the ways that the bus drivers were having to fight for PPE, hazard pay, and that really started to guide the direction of the documentary. We met with Valerie Jefferson and have since created like a really amazing relationship with her. She's really inspirational. That's the voice that you're hearing throughout the doc, the voiceover. And she brought us into a meeting with all of the bus drivers, their union meeting, and met with us, over the course of making the film many times. And so she kind of became the person that we were most focused on because we just were so close with her, by the end of the programs, or by the end of the shooting and everything, that it just made sense to kind of put her in the forefront of our edit.
And she, not only was she a voice for her fellow operators, but she was also a voice for a lot of other city workers who were kind of tasked with taking care of themselves when the city wasn't taking care of them. Like there were a lot of protests, especially in and around the conditions of the hoppers, who are the men and women who are collecting trash around the city.
The sanitation workers.
The sanitation workers, yeah. And she was a big advocate for them as well. So she just like kind of rose to the surface as an activist and a worker who was fighting for other people, but also kind of facing the same conditions herself.
Yeah.
And was a really powerful person. I think that it was just like, it became really obvious that she was a huge part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry.
Wow, your film sounds so amazing. I can't wait to see it. Everything you say about it, it sounds amazing. So my film, Frontera, it was, I mean, it was in the pandemic. I'll always think of this film as my pandemic film, you know, like it was just like, I was just in Colorado. Was living in Mexico City before that and had to move to the States. And so I had always wanted to make a film in the borderlands of West Texas. It's like a really rich border. It's like a remote, isolated border, and it's a border that I'm really familiar with. I'm from West Texas myself. And so me and my co-director, we both just decided to move to West Texas and see what stories we could find, and with the support from ITVS. And so it was just really a film that took shape while we were there in the field on the ground. You know, it was like anybody who would be willing to open their doors to us during a pandemic, basically. You know, like we ended up talking with so many people in the area and learning about how their lives are shaped by living on an isolated border, where you really have to rely on the other side more than ever, because that's where you go to the hospital, because that's where you get your groceries, because, you know, like that's where your husband works. It's like it's really, really cross-border area, that West Texas border. And so, yeah, I think, you know, originally it was a pilot. So originally it was a pilot. So this was like the first episode, and it's kind of like grown and shaped and shifted a lot. And I think now me and my co-director, we're both interested in developing it as a feature. The concept of making like a magical realist piece that takes place on the border.
Absolutely. And I will say like that, the magical realism aspect, it really took me by surprise. And I really kind of were in like programmatic conversations. And I think a lot of the themes that we're kind of dealing with, you know, the theme of the festival's Third Coast, part of that is always, you know, thinking about like, what is that future, and using, you know, that magical realism and, you know, thinking about like futurism as, you know, these like new spaces was really amazing. I really loved that inclusion. I also wanted to talk about, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alejandra, your film is also co-directed, right? You have a co-director on your project?
Yes. Yes.
So how is it, both of you having co-directing projects, kind of figuring that voice and working with a collaborator, especially during, you know, pandemic times, on kind of figuring out that story and understanding like where the project needed to go?
For me, and my co-director Sam couldn't be here, but for me and Sam, this was we've made multiple films together. We've made a couple of series together, and this was like the second piece that we were co-directing. I usually produce his work and he directs. So it kind of felt like an organic relationship, a organic co-directing relationship, where, you know, we work together. We like every step of the process is together. It's like really our vision, you know, it's very collaborative. It's very like, you know, we're both holding the camera, we're both interviewing, it's kind of like we kind of become the same person when we're working together. And so, yeah, I think especially during the pandemic, I couldn't imagine like making this alone. It was a very, you know, it was the magical realism, and just thinking about nature and land, and thinking about all these different elements that we wanted in the piece. I think just having someone to bounce all of those ideas off of, and to just really think about how to make it, you know. So yeah, it was a really great partnership.
Awesome. What about you, Zach, Marta?
Well, Marta and I have worked together for years. Marta is also a visual and installation artist.
Amazing.
And so I think Marta has an incredible ability to kind of, people open up to her. People like express their secrets to her in a way that I think is really kind of amazing. And I also work as a DP, and so I'm very much a visual thinker. So I think that we were able to kind of, it was easy for us to collaborate on this project, I think, especially where we were having to kind of stay, I mean, it's difficult to work on the bus, and I think also we had to kind of separate how we would film and capture the story into like, okay, we're gonna identify people who were regular bus riders and take their route with them. And that was a very visual journey. And so that was something that, you know, I would explore with the camera. We would ride the bus together with them, and we would explore their physical journey from point A to point B. But then we would conduct interviews off the bus, because really just the sound quality on the bus is so hard. It's so difficult to actually talk to people on the bus. And yeah, so I think like both of our strengths were able to be used in like these very different settings in the space of the same story. So it really worked well for us. We were able to, I think, partner up really well for this project and create something that really worked.
And I thought it was really exciting to be like, all right, I've done an edit of the audio. What kind of imagery do you think will work with this? Or pass the edit back and forth. Have moments where Zach's like, oh, this is super interesting. I'm going to follow it with my camera. But then my eyes are all over the place too, because I'm not in the camera, and I can say like, oh, check this out over here. And so there was a lot of balance and sharing of responsibilities. And that was really exciting.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Both of your work really work with liminality and kind of caught between spaces, and also just this like increasing level of precarity with a lot of your subjects. How was it, one, capturing that in a visual medium and figuring out how do you like represent liminality in that sense, and two, with the level of precarity of a lot of your subjects, were there things that you thought about including but you figured either did not help the story or were putting subjects into a little bit more of a, I think I'm a little frozen, putting your subjects into too much vulnerability than you'd would like, or things like that? I hope that came through. I think I froze.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and like I think it's a really complicated answer, but for me, like you know, there's the things that you capture on camera that you have to ask yourself and ask your subject, like, is this A, okay to share, B, like serving the story enough that it like makes it worth it, and C, like is there risk involved, you know? And like sometimes people are like, yeah, share it, I don't care, and it's really up to us to be like, we're not going to anyway, and we're going to make that call because maybe it's just not, it doesn't sit right with us. And for me, like I've just been following my gut for a really long time, which is very different than my head or my heart, and that's been guiding me in a way that so far hasn't failed me. And I'm gonna knock on wood as I say that, but I know that's not really a good answer, maybe because
no, that's a great answer. That's a really good answer.
It's so personal, but
yeah, I think it's really, it's like, it is instinctual, and it's kind of, it's per the situation. I mean, I think like ultimately what we strive to do is create like a safe and like open environment, and even not having to verbalize it, but allow people the space to say, you know, I don't want this to be captured, and for us to be super comfortable with that. And a lot of times, you know, that communication between us and the person in front of the camera is nonverbal. And so I think it's really like paying attention to people's eyes, paying attention to people's body language, and just trying to be as sensitive and attuned as possible to what's happening in the environment. And, you know, sometimes that necessitates turning the camera to another direction, or turning it off, or stopping the roll, or whatever. And sometimes, you know, you're able to kind of roll through those moments. And also, like, I feel like there are moments that are captured in front of the camera, and then there's conversations that happen completely off camera. And so, you know, in the space of the bus, like, because we're all there, we're all contained, we were having conversations with everybody who was captured, whether or not that part makes it into the film. So it's a little bit of like, let's have this negotiation in real time, but then also let's kind of talk to each other and decompress and explore what our kind of temporal relationship is in this moment.
And being really clear about expectations, like, where is this going? Why are we doing it? What is the intention behind this? Who are we? How is it going to be shared? You know, and either people want to get behind that or they don't, and it's really up to them, you know, to let us know, and up to us to be really clear about that stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with so much of what you guys just said, in terms of it being instinctual, and in terms of just having that open dialogue and communication. I think for our film, we wanted it to feel as collaborative as possible. You know, we wanted it to feel like the women that we followed, Molly and Gabby, that they had agency in their own story, and that they were able to, share. We try to make them understand like why we were telling the story about the border, why we thought their stories really fit into it, and I think it was very interesting because after we filmed with them, which was probably like in September of last year, months later, their lives changed a lot. Like one of our characters was pregnant, and was like trying to decide, she was living in Mexico and she was like, I got to go to the US to have my baby. Like, I just know that. So we were having those conversations. We kept up with each other. And then Gabby, her visa was like expiring. She was like, I'm leaving. Like, I have to go back to Mexico. She's like, I have no other choice. COVID has like totally shut down visa offices. And she was just like stuck in like legal limbo, which I feel like happens to a lot of people in this region or in the borderlands. And so they were like, yeah, come back. Like, so much has changed. Like, continue telling our story. And it was actually really beautiful because I feel like the film wouldn't be the film without that ending, without learning, like, that these are real people and their lives evolve, and being in this space leads to that, so it was actually a really beautiful like partnership that we had with them.
That's amazing. Oh, that's really, really good to hear. And y'all just have such an attunement. I also just love talking about instinct in that way, because I feel like so many of there's like people want, these are good at documentary ethics and these are bad documentary ethics, and like those do exist, but there is a lot of that gray area, and you have to like realize and understand and read people, and it's not as like as overt of knowing that there's a constant trust and there isn't a handbook, but it's a how do you like build that relationship, and how do you honor that relationship, respect that relationship, and allow agency, and and really have that. I really appreciate both of you talking about that, both of you. I also kind of wanted to talk about, after having, making these films in the pandemic, how have you been able to exhibit them now? How have people responded to them? Is it, I think especially making, pandemic films happening during the pandemic, has there kind of been, is it too close for people? Do they respond to that? Does it have this like sense of like infinite relatability? I'm wondering how much of like the image of pandemic versus people's experience of it, kind of creates either some sort of tension or, I guess, reprieve, for something they've been feeling but not able to articulate.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is also kind of like an amazing connection to what Alejandra was just saying, which is the way that these stories evolve over time.
Mm-hmm.
And with Valerie Jefferson, who we were talking about, being the main voiceover in NONSTOP, she was actually recently fired from being a bus operator. Wow. From the CEO. Hurricane Ida came through New Orleans during that time. The mayor asked for the bus operators, not all of them, but a lot of them, to stay behind to help to evacuate people out of the city for safety, and to also use the buses as cooling stations, outside of places like nursing homes and stuff, for people who couldn't leave. Because, obviously we had a huge power outage. So how do you keep people cool? And, they were promised, the RTA workers were promised, additional compensation for staying during that time. And when they went to check their paychecks, that money wasn't there when it was promised to be there. So of course, Valerie, who's their union president, went and had some choice words for the CEO. Now they obviously have slightly different versions of that story. Even worst case scenario, I would be, cussing out a CEO of a company that has tons of money, and Valerie, isn't even accused of all of that. But, it was grounds for him to say, we're going to fire you. The union is kind of in a moment of renegotiation. I think it was a really strategic kind of union busting move. And when we heard that, it was a moment for us to say, like, yes, we're sharing this with, funders, networks that are interested in giving money to transit justice organizations and such. Yes, we want to show it to a broader audience, but also like, let's honor Valerie by, we literally took like the, monitor
TV.
and media player to various bus stops around New Orleans and did these pop-up installation screenings with these, kind of like posters that gave information on who to email to advocate for Valerie's reinstatement. And it was a moment for bus operators who were having a break from work to check out the film. Some of the riders to see it during their transfers or waiting for the bus. And so it was a way to kind of, show that work to the community, but it was also a moment to advocate for Valerie.
Wow. Oh my God. I mean, that's a great invention and like the film being used for like material purpose. But I mean, I just cannot believe that's terrible for her, and to experience that and be, the person to kind of to fall in that sword, especially, not only for that, but and for her Anita, but everything that you see in the film. I mean, it's just having to put up with so many different conditions and having to experience those risks and then not have to be like, go like that. I mean, that's horrific. I'm assuming that she's still unemployed, or that she was not reinstated at bus.
Yeah, so they're actually the union's working on suing the company to have her reinstated.
Wow.
Oh, dang. I'm glad okay. Thank God for unions for doing that, like, at least.
Amen.
Yeah. What are you, Alejandra? How's your film kind of been received, and figuring out that the weird pandemic space and the weird timeline of now?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds amazing. Like showing the film at bus stops and to writers and to employees. I love that. That's so cool. That's really incredible. I feel like it's so hard to like make sure that your film gets in front of the audiences that should be watching. Like it's just a hard relationship to have of like the viewer and the maker, and like I think it's really cool that you were able to bridge that gap and figure out a way to like really show it to people who should see it, who are like using the bus every day. I mean, it's really, really cool. Our film, I mean, so at first I was really nervous about pandemic and film, and I was like, it's going to be over, like you're going to see masks and it's going to be strange. And now it's like, it's like everyone's used to it. Like I feel like I don't know, I definitely had those like hesitations when making the piece, like asking people like to be unmasked, like when we were like filming them from far away, like had those kind of conversations. And now, I mean, we were really lucky to be part of the Latino Experience on PBS, which was like an hour-long broadcast special over the summer. So our film was part of that, and it's going to be on Independent Lens soon, which we're really, really excited for. I think like just like what you guys are talking about, showing people, like I really believe in public media, so I'm excited for it to live on public media. And like I mentioned earlier, like I'm really hoping that this film evolves into a feature of some capacity. We'll see, that's early stages, but I really want to continue making this. I really want to just go back to the middle of nowhere, West Texas, and continue filming. So
Absolutely. No, that's amazing. That's amazing. Also, shout out to public stations, and also, just being able to like keep a lookout for, where these films are circulating, but also like the amazing work that's really coming from within, and really sharing light on stories that, I get a broader appeal and a broader lens. I wanted to also kind of ask before kind of wrapping up about site specificity and looking specifically at regional stories. And how they're amplified. And this is a very broad question, so I'm really sorry. And I can narrow it down if you want to, but just can all kind of talk about the importance of these, stories that are so specific to a region, and why they need these amplifications, and kind of what viewers get from that. But also, I kind of want to bring the Houston component here of also, I think I've talked to you individually before this about the way that they resonate, and how you see these pieces, really string together in this idea of not necessarily infinite relatability, but understand like these problems that manifest themselves in very different ways in different places, but in even more similar ways. Of when would that be, public transit, of how New Orleans is handling public transit is also very similar to how Houston is handling public transit, and how transit workers are being taken care of or not being taken care of, or writers. And same thing about like about arts across borders and figuring out like who can be in what spaces and who is allowed to exist in certain ways and what, you know, who is reaching what and what happens whenever these tiny infrastructures have a little breakdown and the cataclysmic effects that it can have. So can you all kind of speak about regionality as it relates to your work and the importance of amplifying this?
Yeah, I mean, something that's really interesting about, you know, it's called the ATU, Amalgamated Transit Union, and they have their chapter of transit workers in New Orleans. That's really rare for a union to exist in New Orleans. You know, the teachers are trying to unionize at this point, the sanitation workers are trying to unionize. And so to put a story out there about the strength of a union and how they can mobilize together in New Orleans and show New Orleanians that at this moment feels really important for other movements that are starting, you know, hospitality workers. So, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I forget who said this, but it's like the more specific you can be, actually, I think increases the ability for other people to understand and empathize with that particular story. And I think for us, like exploring regionality or exploring stories within our region creates like a deeper connection with the people that we're telling stories with, and the ability to return to different communities within New Orleans and to continue to dive deeper with our community of people and other people that we're getting to know, I think increases the efficacy of the stories that we're telling, and ultimately like increases the potential for the stories to create change.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, with me, I had always wanted to make something on the border, in the borderlands, at a border that I was familiar with, but something that instead of, you know, really focusing on tragedy or focusing on suffering or focusing like on all these ways that we understand and know the border, I wanted to make something that like showed the joy and the culture that is created in the border of having like two regions like butt up against each other and collide, and what that happens, and like the you know, within that friction there's like a lot of really beautiful people and music and dance and culture. And so I think by focusing like Zach just said, like by focusing on something so specific, like on a very specific region, I think it could really tell the story of the border. Like there's borders all over, you know, not just our southern border, our northern border, like borders that exist everywhere. So I would hope that people would see Molly and Gabby's story, and that's some feedback we've gotten. People do see themselves in them, you know, they do, like they're like, oh yeah, like I grew up in El Paso and I went to Juarez every weekend, and like stories like that, where through these very specific stories of these two women, they really see themselves and understand more about that lifestyle.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I've been spending some time in Eagle Pass and Piedras Negras.
Okay.
Also, those two towns have such a kind of symbiotic relationship with each other, and the people who work in one town may live in another town, or they may have a partner who lives in one town and they're crossing in order to see them or to get healthcare. And it's just such an interesting relationship. I think it's like hearing your story. It's like, yeah, it's not local to that place. You know, it's actually the story of a lot of different places.
Exactly. Have you seen Western, by the way, the documentary about Eagle Pass? Okay.
Yeah.
It's like I think it's, you know, it extends everywhere. Like there's like so many borders that have their sister cities, and you know, they are so used to, like we went to some borders where you cross like on a little footbridge and stuff like there's like some that are so like it's so interconnected, and it's so like they, you know, there's all these like legal boundaries and stuff, but people still make it happen and they still figure it out, you know, and they've been doing that for centuries. And like, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much for, you know, taking the time and joining us. I mean, this has been phenomenal. Both of you all are all three of you, I'm so sorry, I keep on saying two because I see the two screens. But all three of y'all are just so brilliant, and really just, I love your work, and hearing from y'all, and just been really phenomenal. I want to make sure that our viewers can keep up with y'all, continue to follow your work, see this work, your new work, past work. Where can people find you? Websites, socials, other film festivals, other films that are publicly available?
Oh, sure. I'm finishing up a feature right now called Blood Thicker that I hope to premiere next year in 2022. But another project that I'm proud of is I shot a series of short kind of experimental films directed by Garrett Bradley called America, which has just been made public through Field of Vision. So I think they're like absolutely worth checking out. They're kind of a reimagining of a lost history of Black cinema. And I implore you, go check it out, go watch them. They're beautiful, they're amazing, they're really fun also.
Yeah, I can attest. I actually love all of those. Garrett Bradley had a solo show in Houston at the CAM.
Right.
So I had a chance to see, because you shot alone, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just, yeah, phenomenal. I mean, I went 3 different times to see the exhibition. It was really, really wonderful, and your work on that is incredible.
Thank you.
Absolutely. What are you, Marta?
I currently have an installation up at the New Orleans Public Library because I'm a filmmaker, but a visual artist, installation artist first. So if you're in New Orleans, you can check that out until January 2022. I also want to just plug, like, if you want to put pressure on the RTA to have Valerie reinstated, you can shoot an email advocating for her to be reinstated to RTA board@rtaforward.org.
Amazing. And also, if you want to send that to me later, I can make sure that we share it too to audiences. Absolutely. Oh, of course. Oh, yeah. No, it's very needed.
Yeah, I want to see that. I want to email. Me and Sam, my co-director, were actually about to start production for a feature about a high school mariachi team in South Texas. So I'll be moving to Texas very soon, in the Rio Grande Valley. That's what we got coming up.
Congrats.
Wow. Congrats. Yeah, starting a feature is big time.
Yeah, it's like a whole new world for me. So, you know, it's kind of crazy, but it's going well. And I'm really excited to tell the story of these kids. They're amazing. They're like a high school mariachi band, and they just like live, breathe, and eat mariachi, and they are so sweet.
Wow, cool. Sounds great.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, thank you all again. Really appreciate it. Hopefully everyone enjoys the work. There was the public screening. These films are available to watch after you've rented this for 7 days. So please can do check them out. Follow all 3 of these wonderful artists. And also stay tuned for the Borders No Borders winners, which will be announced on socials hopefully very soon after watching this.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Right, take care.
All right.
Bye, Michael.
Great to talk with you all. Bye.